There's no handbook. I think a lot of validation and the things that you guys are going through now, life is coming at you hard and you're exactly where you're supposed to be. You know, what's the difference between an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old or 19-year-old and a 21-year-old? Not much. You know, that's a year and a half, 2 years apart. There's not much life experience that happens. They're still trying to figure it out.
Welcome to Beyond Theory, a podcast powered by Meadows Behavioral Healthcare that brings you in-depth conversations with firsthand insights from the front lines of mental health and addiction recovery. I'm Dominic Lawson. Transitioning from adolescence to adulthood is a very vulnerable time in a person's life. When you add a global pandemic into the mix, it can make things even more complicated. Today, we speak with Executive Director of the Claudia Black Young Adult Center, Dr. Whitney Howzell, who says that it is okay to have many questions when becoming an adult and that everything does not always have to fall in line perfectly. Let's get out of the abstract and see how this applies in the real world. It's time to go beyond theory.
Dr. Whitney Howzell, Executive Director of the Claudia Black Young Adult Center.
Dr. Howzell, thank you so much for coming back to the Beyond Theory podcast. What's been going on with you since the last time we spoke? Well, we didn't speak, but The last time you was on the show.
An international pandemic.
Fair enough.
It's been going on.
Right.
I think COVID-19 has certainly kept us all busy.
Absolutely.
In more ways than one. There's been some gifts, a lot of curses, but nonetheless, it has definitely kept those of us in the mental health field pretty busy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what are some things that, have kind of so far, because we're still kind of going through it and things of that nature, what are some things that have come out of it for you as far as perspective, some things that maybe you didn't think of before, now you think about all the time? I guess give me some commentary on that if you would.
Perspective. Where do you start?
That much, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
I think an overarching theme, at least for me, has been kind of practice what you preach.
I hear that.
Getting some rest, pacing yourself, really prioritizing what's important, quality time with family, with friends, those things that we stress about in the office and the day-to-day, that they're going to be there tomorrow and the day after. So just doing what you can do. And really leaning on my own social supports and giving them, as much quality time as I can has been really, really eye-opening. Albeit because we didn't have a choice in some respects.
Right.
But I think it really helped me remember how much I missed it,
Right.
Just talking about my day, or not talking about my day, talking about something that's on TV or cooking, cleaning, decorating, all of those little novel things that I've not had time to do in years, suddenly being forced to just kind of stop and pause and get back to it and like, okay, I have other passions outside of work that I like this. I could keep doing it.
Absolutely. And we've seen also over this past 18 months or however long it's been going on of celebrities and musicians and famous people, athletes.
Yeah.
Simone Biles comes to mind, Naomi Osaka comes to mind as far as like really prioritizing mental health and what they do. What did you think about those instances and them speaking out about mental health and advocacy and things of that nature?
I was so proud of them. Especially to see young Black women say that. There's this viral meme going around Twitter and Instagram with their pictures on that says, "You're not going to stress us out." Be beyond just what they do, remembering that they are human beings.
Right.
I can't even imagine the pressure put on. They're in their early 20s. They're each like 24 years old.
Something like that, yeah.
Simone Biles is the GOAT. No doubt about that. But that type of pressure at 24, I don't think that I would be able to handle it. let alone, her or anybody else with the pressure of going out and performing. I'm sure she has things on outside of gymnastics, being in a foreign country, without your family.
Right.
Those athletes were there by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even fathom what that's like, not being, if you had a good day or a bad day, you get up there, you perform well, and I imagine the first person you want to do is run into the crowd and hug your mom and dad, and they're not there.
Right.
Like, what do you do with that? I saw the actual event that she was in when she was telling her coach, nah, I
Right.
just don't trust myself. That is kind of wisdom beyond, regular years for a 24-year-old.
Right.
The average American is like, just power through, you can do it. She has to come back alive.
Right.
You know what I mean? In one piece, to be able to do that again with the same pressures. So, I commend Simone Biles, Naomi, any other athlete. I was overjoyed to see like the outpouring of support from other athletes, with Michael Phelps speaking up for her.
Right.
Some of the track and field stars like Allison Felix, so on and so forth, just really saying, we get it, and we support you, and take the time that you need. I think more than anything, beyond being patriotic, that speaks to the greater human experience that we all should have across the world. So shout out to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it kind of speaks to the Olympic, kind of mantra a little bit as well. You talked about a lot of people who were supporting her. Carrie Strug, somebody who in the 96 who kind of went through an injury or something like that, also supported her as well. So it was kind of interesting to see. And when you talk about Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles, they're kind of in the same age group as some of the people that you work with at the Claudia Black Center.
They are.
And I imagine with everything going on, transitioning from college to work, or even high school to college and stuff like that, that can be a tricky time, a stressful time as well. What do you say to people in that age demographic? Because I know you work with a lot of them, when they talk about those stressors and they talk about those things they're kind of going through.
There's no handbook.
Fair enough.
I think a lot of validation, and the things that you guys are going through now, life is coming at you hard, and you're exactly where you're supposed to be. What's the difference between an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old, or 19-year-old and a 21-year-old? Not much. That's a year and a half, 2 years apart. There's not much life experience that happens. They're still trying to figure it out. I think that there's a lot of exposure, just be it the times, social media, television, to what everyone else is doing. And we all put our best selves on the internet. So I think there is a lot of misconception around, I'm supposed to have this, I'm supposed to be doing this. If you had the grandest setup, it would still be difficult for where you are developmentally. So I always lean on telling them that you're where you're supposed to be. It's difficult. It's confusing. It's supposed to be like that. But moreover, it gets easier and you can get through it. Right. There's no finality in now. You can keep going. You learn some lessons. You fall sometimes you fall up, and you just get up and you keep going.
Right. In that same vein, one of the things I think we see a lot of time, especially in the professional work arena, is like if you're not a tech billionaire by 25, then it's done.
If you're done, right?
If you're not making $100K by 27, then you're done. And
I would still have liked to known how it felt, but that's
right. Fair enough. Right. Now, I definitely understand that. But like you said, there are a lot of people going through a lot of different things right now. So I appreciate you sharing your insight on that as well. And that kind of brings me to something we kind of talked about off air, about a CDC report that we saw as far as like emergency room visits and suicide attempts. And they kind of fall again in that same demographic of the population that you work with. And, I guess I was just curious. You kind of took a look at the report and stuff like that. Kind of give some insight or some commentary on that, if you don't mind, Dr. Howzell.
From what I remember in the report is it was specifically focusing on the time period end of 2019 all the way through 2020 and the emergency room visits that had to do with suicide attempts and self-harm. There was really no delineation between the two, but it was, emergency room visits because of one or the other. And I'll say this, I think that there was a lot of things that could have contributed to that. One, being that we're in a global pandemic, people are home. I think there was a lot more opportunity for support systems or families, parents in particular, to say, I don't like that language. Something's not right. Let me take you to get help, which is the good thing, right? And then I hearken back to, that very black and white thinking, I'm never going to make it. Everything is bad, is really common for people in that age group. Mm-hmm. I think that one of the curses of social media then is that kind of echo chamber of when things is going bad, everything is bad. And there's this black and white thinking of it's not going good, it's going bad, and I have to end it all. Right. It's really common, with this age group. So in saying that, the data shows that suicide rates were up during the pandemic, because of the lack of social supports. Kind of sitting in a room somewhere thinking I'm supposed to have it all, the setback of the average college kid, like, I'm not going to be able to get out in 3 to 4 years. My life is over. What do I do? Which I think in the mental health field, we kind of expect it. There's something about people having to sit with themselves beyond just their age. Older adults are having a hard time coping with this. Right. So I don't want to just demonize or put a big spotlight on this particular population, but it was everyone. Right. I think about the people who didn't make it to the emergency room. Right. Who didn't have someone in their corner saying, let me go get you some help, or this is bigger than all of us. What can we do to support you? A number of things could contribute to that, again, from the general lack of support to people are back at home with perhaps people who've abused them in the past. Right. Many kids go to school, and as I say kids, and to encompass adolescents and young adults, for meals, to have some sort of escape, and they couldn't do that. Right. So I imagine the weight of the world, or just looking for some sort of relief, suicide and self-harm would come up as an option. Very maladaptive, not something that we want to hear. But I think it's just, it was something that was bound to happen given the circumstances. Right. And then we forget that it happened really quickly. Right. We blinked and we were on lockdown. There was no place for anyone to go. There was no escape. There was no time to prepare. So, young adults or anybody who's in that situation, then you got to go to what can we do to support you? Which, I applaud the people who got them that help, whether it be to the emergency room or to a therapist, or, just Zoom sleepover, something. I think that was step one, at the most basic thing that someone could do to be supported in that, that showed in the uptick of emergency room visits. Right. Aside from what got them there, sadly. Of course. Thank you for sharing that. I'm thinking about one of the things that we did was Zoom movie night. Nice. Just to kind of we all hop on a Zoom call and somebody points a screen at something and we all just kind of. We got real creative with the Zooms. Obviously the suicide attempts, the more access to maladaptive coping, drugs and alcohol is not something that we would like to see, but there were some blessings or some really cool things that came out of the pandemic just from being online and in the internet. Mm-hmm. I've never watched so many TikTok videos I am in love with Instagram Live now. Still not huge on Twitter, but
Gotcha.
just the way that people adapt it.
Right.
Young people adapt it. We don't highlight that enough.
In what ways did they adapt, in your opinion, Dr. Howzell?
Ways that they got creative in reaching out.
Okay.
I go back to the internet and to TikTok. There's that yin and yang, that gift and that curse. They found ways to connect with folks just beyond their bubble.
Right.
Globally, trends were started. I think things go viral so often that we just see the novelty in it. But for something to get online that you just did on a whim, and someone in China or South Africa sees it, and they can either relate or connect with you in some sort of way, is a big deal.
Right.
I think that the kind of lost heroes had been teachers, the mental health community, people willing to shift their practices around to be able to connect with people, to start, online practice. And I know for a while it was kind of taboo in the mental health field because there's something to sitting next to a person and not just paying attention to what they're saying, but their body language, their energy. There's so much in silence that is very valuable to the therapeutic process. So I understand why people were really steering away from the online mental health field. But I think if it's done nothing else, it's connected so many people to this thing we call therapy. And what is it? And if that was the baby step that will eventually get you in the door to sitting in somebody's chair physically, then that's definitely a blessing that I welcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You talked about some of those creative ways of connecting. I think it was that generation that showed us how to do the caravan outside of somebody's house.
Yes.
And because we couldn't, go and see
the birthday
grandma and
caravans,
grandpa, birthdays, graduations, and stuff like that. So
I saw this 18-year-old, I don't know if it's still on the internet. I wish I knew his name, but he built almost like this tunnel door thing where he could put his arms through like makeshift gloves so he can hug his grandmother and obviously not physically touch her during the pandemic, but who does that?
Right.
Who thinks of those things?
Right.
We pay so much attention to an idle mind with a young adult and how much bad stuff can happen, but think of how much innovative things really came out of it. It's amazing.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you spoke, you said taboo about something. Something was taboo earlier. And I know, me and you are both people of color. And for the longest time, we know in our community that reaching out for therapy, going to therapy was kind of a thing like you didn't do, or it was discouraged, or it wasn't talked about and stuff like that. But now we're seeing more and more people of color reach out for help, reach out for therapy and things of that nature. I guess I'm curious from your perspective, why the shift? Why do you think? Is it because, and this was happening pre-pandemic, right? Why do you think that shift is happening in your opinion?
I think exposure.
Okay.
Exposure, opportunity, the same way in which a celebrity or social figure can kind of celebrate or highlight the next outfit or pair of shoes or weight loss tea. People were being more forthcoming, Black people in particular, with, I'm not doing well in this pandemic. I'm not doing well at all. This is what I've done. And I feel like there was some sort of safety net on the other side.
Right.
There was people of color, the Black community in particular. Our community is so tight-knit for historical ways that we've just had to be. There's safety, right? And there's protection. But what can also kind of bloom in that is shame. And, not feeling confident enough to step outside of kind of what you were raised with. I think that organically us kind of stepping outside of our church, what's going on in the house, who has kind of curated our own value system, being able to do that ourselves.
Right.
Health, mental health in particular, was one of the first things that people were like, oh, I'm going to jump into this. And I think that happened full-fledged.
Right.
You know, I, again, give kudos to you know, the matriarchs of our community, Black women, for kind of opening that door. You hear people like Taraji Henson talk about mental health all the time and the foundation that she started. You, again, Simone Biles. More and more we heard Black women kind of talk about not just, you know, the daily struggles that they have and just putting up with it, but people stepping out and saying, I don't like the trope of a strong Black woman. This is exhausting.
If you don't mind, explain that trope.
Yeah.
Explain that trope.
I think it's come out of having to be. You know, there is historical racialized trauma around kind of what Black people, particularly Black women, have been able to tolerate. You know, and when I say historical, we can trace that all the way back to, you know, the development of reproductive health. These come from experiments on Black women.
Right.
You know, there were doctors who literally believe that Black women are able to, they have a higher pain tolerance. You know, and if they have a higher pain tolerance physically, of course they have a higher pain tolerance mentally, you know. Kind of being or having to support a household where, you know, typical American society, the man goes out and works. We know what Black men deal with in the larger culture, so they're going to need that support. But when they come home, who do they kind of take that out on? You know, it's the man kicks your husband, and your husband comes and kicks you. You take it out on the children take it out on the dog takes it out on the cat, so on and so forth. And slowly we've you know, I think just by the way we're set up now with kind of Black women stepping outside of the actual house, you know, being the most educated women in American society has helped a lot. Really finding new ways to, okay, we've taken care of everybody else. How do we take care of ourselves? So when we hear, you know, you're a strong Black woman, it almost kind of sounds like an underhanded compliment at this time. Because, yeah, I'm strong, but who do I have to support me?
Right.
You know? And the same innovation that we've had to carry us through so much trauma, I think we're utilizing that to take care of ourselves now.
I hear that.
Yeah.
I hear that. In that same vein, Dr. Howzell, when it comes to, you know, you kind of talked about this a little bit, like if you are, how are you dealing with your mental health? Like, what are some activities that you're doing? What are some things that you're doing in order to feel protected, feel safe, feel okay, or whatever you define for Dr. Howzell that you need to be? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, I'm going to therapy.
Okay.
You know, I highly recommend a therapist should have a therapist. You know, everybody needs not only a sounding board, but just someone to help them process, particularly because so much is coming at us at once as, you know, as a mental health professional, as a Black woman, as just a human going through a pandemic, as someone who's had a job that, you know, didn't stop. How do you stop and process? For me, I have, you know, just something that I do midday and at the end of the day where I just have to stop and pause with, what am I feeling? Because we can get so disconnected from our actual emotions because we're just doing, and we're forgetting, you know, to be. So recognizing and having some awareness of, oh, I'm angry right now, or I'm sad, or I'm feeling shame, or even, hey, this thing went really well. Take a moment and have a little piece of joy and celebrate before you just move on. Another thing that I've started to implement is just really, really long baths. Going to get, I can't go get massages anymore. I take that back. But again, I harken back to the internet. I'm all about the DIY facials, the online meditations, or the guided meditations. They're everywhere. Yoga through YouTube. I'm doing more reading. But again, I think the biggest thing for me has really been that focus on my own emotions and processing and actually giving myself some time and space to do it. And it's like, this is okay. This is okay. You know, I struggle with the guilt of not doing anything or feeling or hearkening back to somebody has it a lot worse than you. Suck it up and do your job, right? But saying, no, you don't have to suck it up. You don't have to do that. You can have the same space. You can, again, full circle, practice what you preach. You know, what are you telling people who come and sit in the chair in front of you? I just think that has been really helpful. And it didn't happen overnight. At all. You know, I definitely give myself some grace with what can you implement today? You know, and you fell off yesterday doesn't mean that you have to stop or you're going to guilt trip yourself into doing it, but really building up a habit slowly. I hope my therapist hears this. And she gives me some kudos for that. So
Gotcha. I hear that. Thank you for sharing it. As we begin to wrap up this session of Beyond Theory, Dr. Howzell, first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And I appreciate your candor and your transparency in our conversation. I guess I'm just curious if there's somebody out there who is, you know, looking to get help, looking to get that help, and they're trying to fight through the stigma of getting that help, you know, or if you are a person who is seeing the person who may need help and you're trying to figure out how do I help that person, if you would just kind of give us some insight and some advice on that, if you would.
Like, there's no handbook from getting over the stigma. It's a brave thing to do, especially if you've never done it before. I think just having that awareness that something is wrong. If you're that person that's witnessing something happening and you want to get somebody some more support, it's really important not to force them. So oftentimes we can force them kind of back into the closet, so to speak. But hey, you know, I noticed this came up, or I don't take for granted that simple question with, are you okay? And how can I support you? Sometimes it's just listening. They don't want any advice. They don't want to do anything in particular, but can I just sit with you? What's on your mind? Those are really simple, basic things. And it doesn't take a trained therapist to do that. It's really humanistic. It's just a way to connect. And I would start there.
Dr. Whitney Howzell is the Executive Director of the Claudia Black Young Adult Center at Meadows Behavioral Healthcare. Much of her work has centered on treating adolescents and families with behavioral emotional issues, sexual compulsive disorder, sexual trauma, and couples with relational issues. Find out more about her work at ClaudiaBlackCenter.com. Beyond Theory is produced and hosted by me, Dominic Lawson. You can discover more, including videos of some of our conversations, at BeyondTheory.com. Finally, thank you for listening, and I hope you join us next time for another episode of Beyond Theory.